Hello and welcome back to the Dugout podcast. This is episode number 46. The league season has concluded. We've got quite a lot to talk about actually. Relegation, playoffs, uh, manager sackings, manager appointments, managerial rumours, European places. Plenty to talk about this week. And I'm joined just by Ethan Barlow this week as Laurie couldn't make it. But Ethan, you know, season sort of winding down, but out of this sort of last weekend, a lot of talking points have come out.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned a lot there, and that wasn't even mentioning chairs being thrown or terrible VAR calls. So, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, there's a lot to really has a lot to unpack. I think Laurie, you'll see in the videos giving his thoughts. I think specifically on the whole Derek McInnes story. But
yeah,
yeah,
he's
it'll be good
recorded
to
that.
go over.
So
Yeah, but it'll be good to go over everything because we've only got a few Scottish football matches before the real end of the season, and then we'll be waiting for the season to start again. So yeah,
yeah. Um, so first of all, there was some games on Wednesday that kind of had had some consequences, you could say. St Johnstone were relegated off the back of their 2-1 defeat to Hearts at Tynecastle after Dundee drew one each with Ross County. So yeah, St Johnstone are down. They're now a championship side, and they actually posted a squad update, but I haven't had the chance to look at it yet. But I'd imagine there'll be a lot of turnover. However, I think we've mentioned it before. With Simo Valacari's way that he wants to play football in a division where they should have uh, sort of better resources and a stronger squad. I think they will see St Johnstone in the Premiership again pretty soon.
yeah, I agree, and I think it was really sort of unfortunate how it played out on Wednesday night because obviously it looked for ages like Dundee were going to win that game against Ross County and give St Johnstone the chance on the last day, but obviously Ross County got that late penalty with Ronan Hale converted, which looked like a quite dubious penalty. But as you said on St Johnstone, I think they may have sort of got rid of a lot of players, ran out of the contracts run down and whatever, but I think the good thing for Valacari is that a lot of the players he brought in January will still obviously be contracted, and there'll be players that he can even add to in the summer to build his real team for the championship.
Yeah, and I know it's still early stages, but I'm glad that so far they've stuck with him
Yeah,
because I think he is a good manager. And he was sort of dealt a bad hand when he came in. So I feel like he could build something there and come back stronger. But yeah, not always not nice to talk about relegations, but I think there are positives you can take from it. There's something to look forward to for St Johnstone fans in the fact that they could have a winning season ahead of them. Right now, it'll be tough. It will hurt. No one wants to see that happen to their club, but I think the championship it'll be a strong season for them next season. Not really much else to say from Wednesday. A couple of big results. Celtic winning 5-1 at Pittodrie. Um, Motherwell beating Kilmarnock 3-0. Cyril Desser's got his 50th Rangers goal. Um, getting the penalty. Um, and he also finished the season as the Premiership's top scorer. I think we'll go through the sort of scoring and assist charts as well, just as a little roundup. I think St Mirren drawing two each with Hibs. Nearly they nearly came back um, and
yeah,
won, but I think they got a goal disallowed. Uh,
yeah, they did.
so you know, and St Mirren actually ended up finishing sixth, and we all backed them to maybe sneak into Europe, but they couldn't get it over the line. We've got a few things wrong this week, and if we're going in the natural order of things, before we go talk about the weekend, we'll dive into the playoff semi-final. Partick Thistle versus Livingston. We all backed Partick Thistle to make it through to play whoever. It would have been Ross County, but at the time, whoever would have finished 11th, and Livingston absolutely scalped them.
Yeah, I think I had a suspicion deep down that could happen, but I don't know. There was a feel good story around Partick Thistle with the management of Brian Graham, him getting his 100th goal against Ayr, and I just felt like maybe the story would continue, but I think Livingston just a step too far. David Martindale shows his quality again, and Livingston will be, I think, favourites for that tie. I know Ross County we'll get onto, but they seem to be the sort of the veterans of the relegation playoff, third year on the bounce. But I think, well, if I'm to give my early prediction away, I think it might be a step too far this time. I would lean towards Livingston with the momentum they're carrying and the season they've had with Martindale.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn because I think the past two seasons I backed Ross County to go down. Not like anything like we didn't have our podcast at the time, but just like you always give your opinion, and I backed them to go down, and they didn't. So I don't know. I've got a similar feeling to you, but I'm just like quite unsure. But yeah, right on to the weekend's sort of fixtures. Celtic drew one each with St Mirren. St Mirren, probably the talking point you could take from this, capping off a very impressive post-split run.
Yeah, unbeaten. Yeah.
I think it was 3 draws and 2 wins. Maybe they feel like they could have picked up a couple of extra points, and maybe the Hibs game. I didn't really see the Celtic game, so I couldn't give an opinion on it. But I think looking forward to next season, it's positive for St Mirren fans. Although there are rumours circulating, and our St Mirren mates seem to think that Stephen Robinson could be on his way down south. But the sort of notion that they're given is that you can't really fault him. He's done a really good job there, and he'd probably get an opportunity that he deserves.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I think the St Mirren fans wouldn't take me as saying this disrespectfully. I think St Stephen Robinson's almost, when you get that manager that's too good for a club, it seems like he's too good a manager for St Mirren, and I think a lot of St Mirren fans have got him right up the top of their all-time list of St Mirren managers. That's how much of an impact he's made. Obviously, he had a really good time at Motherwell as well, got them to numerous cup finals too in the same season, I think. And then obviously 3 top 6 finishes in the row. Yes, they finished just short of Europe this time. But I mean, they were 9 points behind Dundee United, and they closed it right down. And for points on Saturday when they led at Celtic Park and were even drawn at Celtic Park at nothing each, they were in that spot. It was just until, which we'll obviously get on to, Dundee United obviously turned it around against Aberdeen and made whatever happened at Celtic Park immaterial for St Mirren's context of Europe, which was unfortunate because you could tell they'd put a lot into that game, and it was obviously it would have been a heartbreaking way to sort of lose out in Europe, but it meant nothing in the end with the late goal. But yeah, St Mirren, as you said, a season to be really proud of. Top 6 isn't easy for a club of their finances, but Stephen Robinson always seems to work his magic.
Yeah. Just kind of move. You mentioned Dundee United there. We'll talk about the positive aspect first. Dundee United clinching European football, a big moment for their supporters, a fantastic. I think I myself am guilty of forgetting they were just promoted last season. You know, the
Yeah,
job Jim Goodwin's done, and they have faltered maybe in this sort of back half of the season, but as a season overall, coming straight up from the Championship and achieving European football, it's massive, and it's sort of reminiscent of the Dundee United that I I'd say grew up with, that were always up there. And they had some cracking players. Gosh, they've been like 10 years ago now. Thinking about it, yeah, and it is just nice for their supporters, and a massive achievement.
yeah. I think we said that, or I certainly said that, it would be harsh on Jim Goodwin to penalise them even if they did drop out of Europe on the last day. But obviously they got in and done even better to get up to fourth, where they're in Europa League now instead of Conference League, I believe. So yeah, that's a remarkable achievement, to finish over ahead of Aberdeen, who obviously had that immense start to the season. And I think many people fancied Aberdeen to finish at the very least fourth, but shows Dundee United had a terrible post split, but they get that one result at the end to just propel them into fourth, and give them a really last day to remember. You could certainly tell by the pitch invasion after the match, but a real good result, and a really good feeling around the club. I mean, Jim Goodwin's recruited brilliantly this season. Some of the loan signings he's brought in, Sal Dalby, Lucas Stevenson, Jack Walton as well, some of the other signings in general. I know, like you mentioned, around St Johnstone, Dundee United have released a lot of players through contracts, and I think a lot of clubs have done, but I think that's something that we'll probably leave to another episode, as we've got a lot to cover today. But yeah, Dundee United, a really great season back up in the Premiership.
Yeah, fantastic. But not everything was positive about that sort of day. Unfortunately, just idiot, criminal behaviour from a section of the Aberdeen support. A fan throwing a chair onto the pitch during the pitch invasion, an Aberdeen fan, possibly to try to injure a Dundee United player, or hit a Dundee United fan, or something. He actually ends up striking Jack McInnes, who was an unused substitute on the day, and burst his face open. And it's just a really horrible sight to see. And I think from the articles that I've read, it's quite a serious injury he's received from this, and it's just shocking behaviour. And Jim Goodwin, actually, I think he was asked about it, and he said in his interview he's had issues with the Aberdeen supporters before, and it's a shame that it's got to the point where something of this severity has to happen to a good young man, for them to actually do something about it.
Yeah, and I hope this is a sort of turning point, or a reason that the league can, and the governing bodies can put more into sort of deterring that stuff, because I mean it's been part of the game, for a while now, and it probably will be part of the game for quite a while, but something that we need to change. Throwing anything on the pitch at anybody is not acceptable. You wouldn't do it in the street, so why do you feel the need to do it at a football match? Throwing bottles, vapes, that's the kind of usual stuff. Chairs is another step, and a terrible one at that, and it's obviously ended pretty terribly. Hopefully Jack McKenzie can make a full recovery, for the Scottish Cup final, especially, because that's obviously, Aberdeen's biggest game of the season, and he deserves to have the chance to take part in that if Jimmy Tulane chooses to do so. But yeah, a real terrible, embarrassing act for Scottish football as a whole, but for Aberdeen, a real terrible day in all aspects. I seen it when I was leaving Celtic Park on Sky, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But yeah, a real just sort of puzzle as to why people do that,
Yeah.
what makes someone do that. Yeah,
Yeah, and hopefully the perpetrator is caught and actually punished, because I think for sometimes we forget about stuff that you know um in football it becomes like a bit of like a bubble. You know what I mean? You think about it differently than you would in the real world. But make no mistake about it, that's assault. That's that is criminal. And like you said, Ethan, you wouldn't do it in the street, or if you're in a bar or whatever. You're in a bar and you fling a chair off of someone, you're getting arrested. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So whoever's done this to Jack McKenzie should be caught and punished. Not like, because for some reason with fan behaviour, it's like um, the only thing you ever hear about is, oh, they've received like a lifetime ban or something. You know what I mean? This guy's he's really injured, really hurt, Jack McKenzie, and he was clearly trying to hurt someone.
yeah,
So he should, a guy like that shouldn't. He should be banned, but he also should be arrested and prosecuted
yeah,
for that behaviour, because it's unacceptable in any walk of life, in the football ground, in a bar, wherever you are, out and about. Just it's unacceptable behaviour, and it's sad that when there's so many positives to talk about in the sort of closing um, of the season, a lot of exciting things, a lot of stuff, because we love football and we like to talk about it. There's loads of good things to talk about. It's just sad that it's been ruined by some absolutely shocking behaviour. But anyway, I feel like I've rambled on about that for a while. So we'll move on to what will we move on to? The relegation games. Um, Ross County
well,
and
we could go. We could go. We haven't covered Hibs Rangers yet, have we?
oh yeah, I forgot about that. Hibs Rangers 2-2 draw. Um, Rangers. I'll just dive into it. Rangers were denied the clearest goal I have ever seen in my entire life. What is going on in the VAR room? Like, it, honestly, it's absolutely mental. The how, and it's funny. It's against Hibs again, right? So with Celtic, and how long they spent here analysing that and trying to zoom in, and they still made the wrong decision in the end. This one, you can see it from a blooming mile away, and they still made the wrong decision in the end. And I just don't understand. Like, first of all, a point I want to make, and I don't know what the finances would be like, or if you can't get it into some grounds. Scottish football needs goal line technology. Needed it for a while. I've been baffled that we got VAR before we got goal line technology. So I think we need it. But you don't need goal line technology to see that that's a goal. It
Yeah,
literally touches the net. It like the inside of literally, it like past the post and touches the net. It's a goal. I
yeah.
just I don't understand.
No, I was going to say, yeah, the kind of unbelievable and just maybe probably the worst decision of the season, and then on the last day,
And that's
and I mean,
something as well, because there's been
and
some absolute shockers.
and it'll be in fresh in everybody's memory, but it's one of the ones where because it doesn't have a great bearing on any of the two teams on the day, it doesn't have a great bearing on the league context as a whole, but it could have done. We could be sitting here talking about, I know it's very hypothetical and it hasn't happened, but we could have been talking about the difference between the league title being going one way or going the other. And I know that wasn't the case, but very well could have been. And it shows that, yes, okay, there might be a certain level of incompetence, but I mean, how you can't see that's crossed the line, I don't know.
Yeah. Do you know what? I don't mind um, if they make mistakes because they're human beings, right? Like, but it's not as if I'm not one of these people that want refs to get it 100% right every time, and I'll be raging if they don't. Like, because you understand that these are human beings at the end of the day, and human beings make mistakes. But this, you mentioned incompetence. This is the highest level of incompetence, and you're right. I don't know how you can see that. Like someone like my granny who really doesn't know anything about football. If I showed her that still image, she'd be like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Do you know what that is?" And she'd be like, "Oh, it's a goal because it's crossed the line." You know what I mean? It's,
Yeah.
it's absolutely mental.
Yeah, I think the worst bit about it as well is obviously Hibs got the pitch and score, so it's like a two-goal swing in a way. Rangers could be 2-0 up, but instead it's one each. That makes it even worse. The only thing I could maybe think is um, that it could have been given as a foul by Raskin for the sort of shove on Rocky Bashiri, but even then
Yeah,
they've got to address that it crossed the line. So
yeah,
they came out and said that the ball it wasn't conclusive evidence to say that the ball crossed the line. I think it was. I think we all seen that. So if they're given a foul, that's fine. That's their decision. But they need to come out and say the ball was crossed the line, but there was a foul in the build up to the goal. That would be fair enough. But they can't just avoid the problem completely and just give Hibs the goal because I mean
see if
it's
they're doing
ridiculous.
that though. See if they're doing that. I think even before the push that you mentioned, um, Raskin actually breaks clear of Rocky Bashiri, and Rocky Bashiri holds his hand and drags him back, intentionally trying to stop him from scoring. So, if it's not a goal and it's not crossed the line, is that not a red card and a penalty? You,
Possibly.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's absolutely mental, and it is shocking decision making, and we've seen it countless times this season with both our teams, with every other team, refs making blunders, and I'd probably agree with you. People might say, "Oh, it's because you're a Rangers supporter you're saying this," but this is possibly the worst decision I've seen, and it's not good when it is getting worse. Last game of the season, you know.
Yeah.
What
Um,
will we
yeah.
get first game of next season? Someone
Yeah.
fly kick someone in the face, and they're like, play on. You know,
Yeah. I don't know. But something needs to change. I don't know. I don't think we'll see goal line technology because I believe it costs about £1 million per team or something like that. So it's something that with how VARs went, I mean, do we even trust the officials that they'll be able to use goal line technology properly? Although it's a
it's
pretty automated
yeah, goalie.
technology, but
The ref, it lets the ref know the ref's watch buzzes, and then it's.
yeah, I mean,
But
it
they
seems
might
pretty
find they might find a
self-explanatory,
way to
but
they might find a way to mess it up. You never know. Uh,
yeah,
but like I said, no, but there is really poor decisions happening all the time. But these are the rest that we've got, so we just have to hope that they'll look at themselves and improve, and yeah, and hopefully move forward in the season and into the next season, and hopefully be better, but I'm not overly optimistic. But yeah, I just keep thinking the ones that stick out to me, the poor decisions. It was the Celtic disallowed goal against Hibs. It was the League Cup final where you hear the audio of the guy saying he's more outside the box than in. If he's in the box and he's been impeded, it's a penalty. Uh, so yeah, but anyway, I'll stop ranting and raving about that. We'll move on to the sort of the relegation kind of fixtures.
I was just gonna speak about a couple of players in this game before we went on.
Oh yeah,
I know we're doing this in a sort of weird order, but there's so much to cover. I was just gonna say, Martin Boyle, I got another goal and assist for him, and I think he's rounded off his season pretty well. 20 goals, 11 assists. Another player on the other team, the opposing side, who I think's rounded off his season brilliantly, is Nicholas Raskin. Weird stats in the split: 5 games, 3 goals, 4 assists. I mean, I think we've all seen that Raskin's had a great season, but you wouldn't associate him with goals and assists. You'd more associate him with sort of dictating the tempo of game, breaking up play and stuff like that. But he's went on a wee attacking flurry recently. I don't know if that's something Barry Ferguson's maybe got out of him in the last few games of his tenure. But I thought that was interesting. He obviously had that other goal that didn't even stand as well.
yeah.
Um,
And he's the quality of some of his strikes have been really nice. The game against Dundee United midweek was a really nice goal, hard and high near post while running onto the ball. And he has, I think he's finished the season with 14 goals and assists in the Scottish Premiership. For a six, that's not bad. So, and he's definitely one I think Rangers need to hold on to in the summer to try and build their new squad. There are players that I would be willing to let go, like Hamza Agaman. If a good bid comes in for him, I'd be willing to let him go. But I think there's certain ones where they're just integral to your team, and especially in a time of rebuilding, he's one that you can't afford to get rid of.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say he's the one that you're going to take into to next season as the sort of the one who's the constant. I think the other one I think we've spoke about is probably going to be Diamande. So my question is, you've set me up here. How much of a money would it take, do you think, for Rangers to sell Raskin in the summer?
30 plus.
30+ million. Okay.
Yeah. If you'd asked me a couple of months ago, I would have maybe said 15, 20, but I just think he's still. I listened to a guy on the radio. It was absolutely mental. I think it was on Super Scoreboard, and he was a Rangers supporter, and it was a rant about Raskin, and he was like, he's had about 10 good games this season. He's not even that good, and I'm like, oh my god, that's what is this guy doing? Has he ever watched a Rangers game this season? I know we have been rubbish, but I think he's been one of the standouts. But yeah, back to your original question. I think 30 plus. I would maybe that's my own personal valuation. Maybe Rangers would sell him for less than that, but
I think maybe they shouldn't sell him for less, but I think they maybe would to sort of found or finance the sort of rebuild that's going to obviously happen in the summer under a new manager and the new ownership. And do you think that would have been Václav Černy's last game for Rangers?
it looked like it. I was at Ibrox on the Wednesday, the game before, and he did a big lap around the stadium at the end, clapping the supporters, and it seems like his time is probably done. Maybe the two clubs can't make it work. I'm sure we'll hear rumours over the summer concerning him, but it looks like it, and it goes back to that old saying: "Never fall in love with a lone player." Um,
Yeah,
And Rangers have had a few over the years, over the recent years. Malik Tillman, Avdala Sima, and now Vaslav Cherny. So yeah, it's gonna. But you know, they just need to look forward. We've had a few links. I think we've actually signed up I don't think it's been confirmed by the club, but reports saying we've signed up a PSG's under-19 captain. Um, Kamara, I can't remember his first name off the top of my head. PSG offered him a professional contract, but I think he turned it down to come to Rangers. Weirdly enough, but yeah, and we a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if these links have, if these rumours have turned into anything more, but we were linked to Musa Ginepo, former Southampton player. So there's a couple of positive rumours flying about. But we'll move on to the relegation games and the Derek McInnes derby.
Well, for Kelly, it has certainly been a season to remember. Finishing in ninth isn't great, but for Kelly, you do kind of not take top six finishes for granted, although perhaps we did have the quality to at least mount a top six challenge, but consistency was very much the problem. There was some great memories made this season. Kelly in Europe was absolutely brilliant. I mean, the games against Cercle Bruges and Copenhagen in particular do stick out. I mean, especially against Bruges, a full rugby park was brilliant. I was there. And to be honest, about three quarters of Kilmarnock made the trip over to Belgium, and that was quite a sight to behold. And I remember being on a few other podcasts around about that time with rather prestigious broadcasters getting up at 6:30 in the morning, do that. Seeing Stephen Craigan at 6:30 a.m. certainly wasn't on my season 24-25 bingo card. But I think it's best that I actually address the slight elephant in the room, which is Derek McInnes. Of course, at the start of this season, he signs a contract extension until 2027, which, for the most part, it seemed as if he was going to, see out this season and then maybe Kelly would reevaluate that position because there was a lot of discontent around Derek McInnes and his style of football, etc. But then a few short weeks ago, after Kelly's safety was secured, basically Neil Crickley was sacked at Hearts, and at which point some Kelly fans could smell blood a little bit, and were thinking, would he be tempted by the bigger job? Would he be tempted by the bigger budget of Hearts and the lure of Tynecastle? It turns out he was, which, in my view, in theory is fine, but the way McInnes and the club, for that matter, or both clubs, went about it wasn't quite right. So before Kilmarnock played Dundee to secure survival, Derek McInnes didn't do his press conference. He left it to his assistant manager, Paul Sheeran, who all but confirmed that there was interest for, in McInnes for the Hearts post. And from then on in, Kelly fans got a little bit sceptical. But, a few days later, we played on D, we win, and, that's that. But it's one of these ones where people are thinking, right, is McInnes truly committed to Kilmarnock? But after the Dundee game, we stay up. That's great. The following day, Rangers are playing Aberdeen at Ibrox. And Derek McInnes, as he often does when he's not on managerial duty, was doing a little bit of media work as a pundit for Sky Sports. And, well, he was put under a wee bit of pressure by Ailey Barber and indeed former Kilmarnock striker Chris Boyd, at which point he basically confirmed the media rumours that he would like the Hearts job, and he all but confirmed speculation of an approach coming on the Monday, so the following day. That approach did come, and a few days later, Derek McInnes confirms to the press before Kelly played Motherwell that Kilmarnock and Hearts have agreed terms over a compensation package. He said little else, other than the fact that he's going to be in the dugout for the remaining two matches away to Motherwell and, aptly enough, at home to Hearts. However, the game against Motherwell comes around. Kelly lose 3-0, and the Kilmarnock faithful who travelled to Fir Park made their feelings known about McInnes. We'll keep it at that. At which point, Derek McInnes and the board make a decision the following morning that it would be best that Derek and his coaching staff, so that's McInnes, the aforementioned Paul Sheeran, and Alan Archibald, then former Partick Thistle manager, felt it would be best they weren't in the dugout. And then, of course, Kilmarnock had Chris Burke take interim charge. He, of course, former Kilmarnock player, who is currently the under-18s manager, who just led his side to Scottish Youth Cup glory. So Kelly fans see him as a potential candidate for the job. And when I say candidate for the job, of course, Derek McInnes has been confirmed now as Hearts manager on a 4-year deal. And I find that somewhat interesting. And indeed, Sheeran and Archibald have went alongside him. However, as we're saying, candidates for the Kelly job, Chris Burke is definitely one, but maybe it's a little bit too young. The name on most Kelly fans' lips is Stephen Naismith, of course, former Kilmarnock player, Kelly Academy graduate, a player who did well for Kelly, but of course left for Rangers when he was pretty young, and of course he was Hearts manager, a wee bit inexperienced, but potentially a good shout. Stuart Kettlewell's name's been in the frame too. He did rather well at Motherwell, but I'm not sure if he's maybe a little bit too close to Derek McInnes. Of course, Tony Docherty, who was McInnes' trusted right-hand man, has just left his first ever managerial post at Dundee. He was relieved of his duties. I'd be interested to see whether he is a candidate, but then is he too much of a continuity candidate? I know this is similar about Kettlewell, but I suppose it applies even more to Docherty. Although I would say Docherty's side are a bit more attacking than your typical McInnes team, but they don't tend to keep the back door shut. But what I did come across was probably a really left field shout. It came out through one of the papers, so we'll see how reliable this is. I think it was the Herald that reported that John Carver could be a contender for the Kilmarnock job. If that name rings a bell to you, he is the self-proclaimed, or was the self-proclaimed best coach in the Premier League when he was interim manager of Newcastle United, his beloved Newcastle United. And he really did make a fool of himself in that role. However, he is a well-respected coach and assistant manager, and has had managerial spells abroad as well, in the likes of Poland and I believe Cyprus. But most interestingly, he is, of course, the assistant manager to Steve Clarke at Scotland. And of course, Steve Clarke tasted great success at Kilmarnock and does maintain quite a close relationship with Kelly's majority shareholder, Billy Bowie. So much so he was in the director's box on Sunday for the game against Hearts. So we don't know if there's been any sort of conversations had there with regard to his Scotland assistant. So time will tell on that one, whether John Carver's a manager or not. One thing he certainly is a character. I mean, Scottish football is brilliant for getting characters in there. So it's going to be interesting to see who Kelly bring in for the upcoming season. I imagine it will be done sooner rather than later. I mean, the League Cup games are on what, July the 12th or 13th, so kind of early to mid-July. And Kelly are playing in a testimonial for Rory McKenzie against their county cousins Ayr United on July the 4th. So I would imagine a new manager will be in place well before then, with pre-season starting in the middle of June. So I'll hand you back to the lads, and hopefully Kelly can do well next season, whoever is in the dugout. And no, it won't be me.
Thanks to Laurie for that his take on the matter. So moving on to sort of the rest of the teams, nothing to to sort of breaking news to talk about. Ross County obviously finishing that playoff spot. Dundee safe, but as Ethan mentioned too, Tony Docherty has been sacked. I think we should talk a little bit about that. I think that's kind of crazy. I know they've not had the
Yeah.
but they survived, and for a team like Dundee, you can't really ask for much more. I don't know. We've made criticisms on his style of football. It's not super sustainable, especially sort of the style of we'll score more than you, but you don't have the best attacking talent in the league. But it is. I just think it is it's not. It's surprising. It's really surprising, and I can't quite believe that he's been sacked.
Yeah, I mean they come up from the championship, well not last season but the season before, and I think had they finished 10th last season, would they be getting sacked? I'm not sure. I think it's maybe a sort of it's a problem of his own success and the fact that like Dundee United this season he's been promoted and then they've went straight into the top six and then this season there's been a fall off, no doubt about that, but I mean they're still a really entertaining team to watch. I think we've spoke about how they score a lot of goals. I think they might be fourth for goals scored. They're obviously first for goals conceded, which is why they're so far down the league. But I mean, if you're a Dundee fan, surely you get entertainment out of watching a Tony Docherty team. And yes, it's not been as good as last season, but Dundee are never going to be a team that's going to finish top six every season. And the fans pitch invaded at the end of that St Johnstone game. Well, no, not St Johnstone game. Sorry, the game midweek. I think it was. Was it midweek or was it against St Johnstone? It was one of the two games. The Dundee fans pitch invaded because they're happy with they're happy with their Premiership safety.
It's kind of a
And
invasion.
yeah, I think we might be pitch invading for anything now.
You've got the team up their own pitch invading for Europe.
Yeah,
pitch invading.
but now I'm saying this, I'm double thinking whether I actually seen this, but I'm pretty sure I seen a Dundee pitch invasion, and so they're pitch invading because they're happy staying in the league, and yeah, I think going into the last day, I think a lot of us expected them to do enough against St Johnstone to stay above Ross County, but they've stayed in the league. The fans are happy with that. Yes, they would have wanted the same as last season, but if you're being realistic, Dundee are not they're not a top six regular club. Yes, they can push for that, but I think you've got to give Tony Docherty the chance to go at it again. They obviously haven't done, which I think opens up avenues for other clubs in the league. I think Kilmarnock. I think I posed the question to Laurie last week. I didn't expect it to play out like this, but if he goes to Kilmarnock, then it could be a very interesting one. I think we spoke about whether they have the actual playing staff there to play the style of play that he wants to play. But yeah, it's a really interesting one. And yeah, that's why we say when St Johnstone keep Valacari that it's refreshing to see, because look at how easily managers are getting sacked. But yeah, Dundee have had a mixed season. They've had some really good performances, they've had some great attacking threats. Leo Cameron's finished the season well again after a little sort of slump in form. He had a few injuries, I think, through that time, but he hoped to carry that form into pre-season where he'll obviously be at Ibrox. And then Simon Murray's had a great season as well, of course, nominated for Players Player of the Year.
What do you make? So sorry, just a Simon Murray question. So the Scotland squad was made, and Kieran Bowie, I think, is a great inclusion. But do you think just off of like pure form, Simon Murray should have been given a chance to pull on the Scotland jersey?
Yes, I think so. I think he deserves recognition for the season he's had. And I don't think anyone would complain if he was in the squad. I really like Kieran.
The only thing I can think of is, maybe it's because he's older, but Steve Clarke's no shy of wheeling out the pensioners. So I don't know. I don't know why he wouldn't just give him a chance.
Exactly. He's obviously never had a Scotland appearance, and he's never been in form. He's in the form of his life after the 2 seasons he's had, and I think, yeah, it would be a really nice moment for him to get, what is he, 33, I think he is, for him to get his Scotland debut. And I think Kieran Bowie is one I really like. Kieran Bowie's a player that I can see going really, really far in the game. I think he looks like a really good player. He maybe doesn't get the sort of plaudits that other strikers in the league get, but yeah, I was really I seen that. I didn't think of him being selected, but I seen that and I thought that's a really, really nice selection.
Good. He's good with the ball at his feet. He's a good finisher. He's tall. He's physical, which is probably what Steve Clark looked at and went, "That throw him in." But
Yeah.
probably wasn't.
No, the one if I had to take one of the strikers out, sorry, I would have probably taken James Wilson out.
Yeah.
Because he's still got plenty of time to sort of prove that he's going to be useful for Scotland. I mean, he's only 18, so
just turned 18.
where would
So.
yeah, so it would have been nice to see Simon Murray get a call up. But I think there's a lot of players that can count themselves unlucky to not be called up. Yeah, I mean, Lyle Cameron's not had a call up. He might get a call up in the near future. His captain of last season, Luke McInnes, not had a call up either. And obviously the midfield's the strongest area, but I think in this sort of window where it's two friendlies that mean absolutely nothing, you would maybe throw some of these players in because yes, you want to keep the sort of foundation of the squad there, but you also want to try out these players that will maybe never play for Scotland again, and you play them and they surprise you how good they are. And okay, maybe you don't learn a lot from friendlies, but it's nice to hand players caps when they warrant them for their domestic performances, especially in Scotland.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of the sort of the league kind of talking points. Maybe there's a few things we can talk about. Obviously, the Scottish Cup final's coming up, so we'll talk about that in this episode. Just a few rumours, perhaps some actually confirmed outgoings from Rangers. So Václav Černý, Casemiro and Rafael Fernandez are all returning to their parent clubs. We touched on it earlier. Václav Černy's the headline, and I don't think we'll see him back at Ibrox, unfortunately. Yanis Hadji, Leon Balogun, and Tom Lawrence are all leaving because of the expiry of their contracts. I would have re-signed Hadji and I would have re-signed Leon Balogun. I just think that Balogun, he's not always fit, but I don't know if this is insane to say. Maybe it's like weird bias, but I think he's maybe the best or the second best defender in the league, like when he's like fully fit and he can play, and he's got that experience in the Bundesliga, and I feel like you can just tell from like looking at stuff, he really helps the youngsters, and he really just loves playing for Rangers, and he's good in the air. He's it's weird. So when he's fit, it's weird to say this. He's physically like excellent, but not, if you know what I mean, because he can still jump. He's rapid. He's good on the ball, but he picks up like little like calf injuries and stuff like that, and he just broke his cheekbone for like the fourth time in his career or something. So yeah, but I don't know if I'm just talking completely out my backside here, but like when Leon,
I think I understand your point. I mean, I wouldn't say he's one of the sort of best defenders in the league, but that's because he never is really fully fit. But he's shown in the past when he was a little bit younger. Because obviously you've got to remember he's obviously getting on a bit now. And I think that might be why the sole reason why Rangers have let him go, because as you said,
he's like 36, I think.
Yeah, it's one where you've seen this season that you can still offer a bit. He can still contribute. He can still, as you said, maybe get and speak to the younger players, give them advice. Because he showed in the past that a few years ago, the game that comes to mind would have been Ange Postecoglou's first derby at Ibrox. I think it was the 1-0 game, was it? Where Hollander scored. I think it was that one where I thought he was brilliant in that game, and I think he was playing at right back in that game, if I'm not mistaken.
He was playing right back. I think Kyogo.
Yeah, so yeah, so I mean, he would be one that you'd maybe just keep around, but you don't know what Rangers' sort of wage structures like at the moment, and maybe they're trying to shave a bit off that. Yanis Hadji as well. He's a player that he always seems to come into his own at Rangers in points, and then he kind of just drifts out the team again. And there's definitely a player there.
I think that injury really hampered him, where he was out for like a year.
Yeah, but even this season, he's shown moments where maybe he can be that guy that Rangers need. There was a few weeks where he was starting, and then he kind of just drifted out the team again. And yeah, it's one of the sort of what if stories with Hadji, because he's definitely a player that's shown his potential and moments, but maybe he's just not consistent enough, and
Always
maybe
class.
that's why Rangers have.
Always class for Romania as well.
Yeah, yeah, I remember the goal he scored against Germany. Was it? It was an absolute peach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are kind of the outgoing kind of confirmed. Something that isn't confirmed, but is looking likely, more likely by the day. Steven Gerrard looks like he could be coming back to be the new Rangers manager. Loads of reports. One thing as well, he pulled out of Jabril Cisse's upcoming charity match. I think it might be this week or the following, saying he couldn't attend because of professional reasons. So, and he's unemployed right now. So, it's looking like he could be the next Rangers manager.
Yeah, I think it's one that we've discussed on here previously, and I've said that I don't think I think it wouldn't be the right step for Rangers, but looking at some of the managers that Rangers have been linked with, I know rumours are sometimes a lot of nonsense, but some of them have been absolutely horrendous to the point where Steven Gerrard's someone who you know what he's going to give you, you know what he's done at Rangers. Yes, he didn't win the most when he was there, but he came into a Rangers team that was never the best team in Scotland, and he made them the best team in Scotland for that season, and of course until pretty much until he left. So you don't know what he's going to be able to do. It's going to be really interesting, but it's definitely someone that a lot of the Rangers fans can resonate with and they can get behind. I think there'll still be a lot of Rangers fans that are unhappy with this appointment, as there was similar sort of scenario where Celtic fans were unhappy with the reappointment of Brendan Rodgers. Both managers obviously left middle of the season. So it'll be really interesting. But yeah, as you said, it is really looking like Steven Gerrard's going to be the man in charge at Ibrox, which is a real sort of turn of events. And I'm sure it's a job he'll take because he's not had the best of times elsewhere either. So yeah, it's an interesting one, but I'm looking on it a little bit more positively from a Rangers sense than I was maybe a few weeks or months ago.
Yeah, I'm a bit unsure because I don't think he's the greatest sort of tactically.
Yeah.
But it's that mentality thing of when he was here. He had that thing of like you do need to win every game, and he's sort of obviously never won the league title at Liverpool, but he knows what it is to play for a club where the fans are demanding, and he can, and he's with his sort of connections as well. He brought in some good players from like the lower reaches of England, and we've seen Rangers try to replicate that with a few sort of unknown talents, and it hasn't really worked out. And most of the guys he brought in, turned into good players for Rangers. Like obviously, Glenn Kamara was from Scotland, but I think he was. Was he a Steven Gerrard? Yeah, I think he was. I think he was a Steven Gerrard.
I think he was, yeah.
And then some of the older guys that came in to help us out as well, like Jermaine Defoe, and and then obviously some of the other guys, the younger guys, Calvin Bassey, Joe Aribo, really good players. Who Ryan Kent. So maybe with these connections and the new sort of ownership coming in, they can make some smart signings. So, but yeah, it's what I'm unsure about. But I think I've said it in chats and stuff. I'm not really bothered who comes in. As long as it's not like a horrendous appointment, I'm not really bothered, and we'll see what happens. You know what I mean? I'll back whoever comes in, and hopefully they can turn this thing around.
Yeah, I'd agree. With Steven Gerrard, as you said, he's maybe not the best tactician, but in terms of a manager, getting the players up for games, his contact book, as you said, players want to play under Steven Gerrard. That's all things that falls in Rangers' favour. And yes, I think that was spoken about before that Michael Beale was maybe a lot of the brains behind it in the first spell. He's obviously not going to be part of the staff, what it's looking like, not surprisingly. But you've got Steven Gerrard knows how to win Scottish Premiership league matches, and that is something that a lot of the managers that have came in after him haven't known how to do. He knows the Scottish League's a weird league where you may think, oh, Rangers have got a lot bigger budget than everyone else, Celtic have got a lot bigger budget than everyone else, but it's never that easy. You need to know how to play against these teams, how to go away to Dens Park, Rugby Park, and get results, and that's what Gerrard done for a lot of his spell, especially towards the end of it. So that's something that the Rangers fans can look forward to, at least, that they've got someone who knows how to grind out results in the Scottish Premiership.
Yeah, definitely. Right, so let's think. So you've got we've kind of touched on it earlier, but we've got the playoff final. Do you want to give a quick prediction?
Yeah, I think the first leg's tomorrow, isn't it? Thursdays Wednesday today, Thursday tomorrow's we're recording. Let me see who will be playing. Is it Livingston at home first? I'm guessing.
I think so.
Let me just double check that. Yeah, Livingston at home first, and then the second leg on Monday. So I'm going to go with a 3-1 aggregate win for Livingston. I think they just have too much. I think they'll have too much for Ross County. Yeah, that's my prediction.
I'm gonna go with a 3-2 aggregate win for the Staggies.
Oh,
I don't know. I just feel like they've got that playoff immunity, that armour. You can't bring them down.
Fair enough.
So yeah, I'm gonna go for the Staggies to stay up. Last thing, I think we need to talk about big thing: Celtic versus Aberdeen, the Scottish Cup final this weekend. Celtic looking for a treble, Aberdeen looking to, get a trophy to make their season. I wouldn't say to redeem their season, because overall it's been a fairly decent season for Aberdeen, but I'd say just to maybe make it a bit better after their tremendous start and then that horrific winless run, and then finishing fifth in the end when it looked like they were a cert for third or even second.
Yeah.
So it is a big game. Celtic looking to add their 121st trophy to their history, I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big game. I personally can't see it going any other way except from a Celtic win. I don't think it will be as conclusive as the game at Pittodrie. I think someone's ringing my bell if you heard that. But yeah, I don't think it will be as conclusive as the game at Pittodrie. However, I think Celtic will comfortably win.
Yeah, I agree with your point. I mean, usually these sort of dress rehearsals, you could call it, with the game at Pittodrie, the second last game of the league season, 2 games before the final. But Celtic obviously put out their stunt doubles, you could call it. It was a pretty rotated team, almost in every position, and they beat Aberdeen with ease. So that'd be worrying for Aberdeen.
That was good. Dress rehearsal, stunt doubles. I like that.
Yeah, I was cooking that one up. But yeah, I think Aberdeen it'd be really worrying, especially losing the last game of the season. It's all a bit doom and gloom at the moment. Um, you never know. It's a Scottish Cup final, but as you said, I think Celtic are resounding favourites, and everything's going well at Celtic at the moment. That game, that 5-1 game, they had they rotated the team and still won pretty well, very comfortably with some notable scorers. Mike Davrowski, who I thought played very well in that game again. I think he has.
Every time he plays, people are like, "Oh, he's pretty good," but he never gets a sniff.
Yeah, I know it's strange. You're wondering why, because every time he plays, he turns in a really good performance. He got his first Celtic goal, a good header. Who else was a notable scorer? James Forrest didn't score in that game, but Johnny Kenny did. On his first start for Celtic, he scored his first Celtic goal.
James Forrest
And
did goal at the weekend to
yeah, he did. He did. I was just going to get on to that. Adam Ida got his 20th goal of the season. So not too bad for Adam Ida. Maybe you would expect more for what best part of 10 million, but we'll have to see how he goes next season. The other sort of 2 points I picked up from that Aberdeen game was Sean McArdle came on again, and I thought he looked very good. He looks like one of the players. I know you get youth players that come up and they kind of the game passes them by slightly, but he looks like someone that in the short amount of minutes that he's played, he looks like someone who can maybe make an actual go at trying to play for Celtic, because a lot of the Celtic youth players in recent times that hasn't happened. And then the other story from that game was obviously Rio Atati out for the season, with that late tackle from Papagay. Maybe Rio Atati's last game for Celtic. He obviously collected his winners medal at the weekend on crutches, and that game at the weekend, as we touched over, was a pretty terrible game for the neutral. St Mirren were trying to slow it down for large parts, but understandable with their scenario going for Europe. But Celtic did get that goal in the end, and it was almost like football was written by a scriptwriter. It just had to be James Forrest with the last kick of the ball, didn't it?
Yeah.
For he's got his first goal of the season, 16 consecutive seasons. And I think James Forrest got the recognition on that day that he really deserved. He got the Celtic fans made a song for him after all these years of not having one, and then he was awarded the trophy of being the most decorated Celtic player by the previous award winner, Bobby Lennox, who was at the game. So that was a real nice moment for him. But yeah, everything's looking good for Celtic at the moment, and they'll take massive confidence into the final, where I think, as you said, it might not be as one-sided as that game at Pittodrie, although I still see Celtic winning by, I'm going to say 3-0 Celtic would be my early prediction.
Okay. I'm gonna go similar. I'm gonna go 3-1. I think Aberdeen will get a goal. So that concludes this episode, sort of a season kind of roundup for the Dugout. We will be back with other episodes. We might try to think up some fun things to do, some interesting ones. There'll obviously be transfer rumours, managerial rumours, plenty of stuff to talk about. And although the football will be finished, it will be a summer of interesting things. We may branch out to other kind of other kind of leagues, just to, so we actually have talking points as well. So, but yeah, thank you to everyone for watching and listening. Go check out the Dugout Twitter at the Dugout 2024. make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you and goodbye.